All right. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. So glad to have you here. Welcome to the CI Fellows February third Thursday webinar. It's a pleasure to have you here. We have a treat for you today as Cliff Kalb will talk about how to set up an insights and intelligence function. I'm Craig McHenry, currently the secretary of the CI Fellows and work full-time as the Senior Director of Business Development for the ABIS Group, innovative healthcare-focused market landscape and intelligence platform provider, headquartered in Northwestern University's Research Park in beautiful Evanston, Illinois. Most of my career prior to that was at Wyeth Pharmaceuticals, where I helped set up the first BNCI function, as we called it. And it was there, working at Wyeth, where I first met Cliff Kalb, our speaker today. So whether you're tapped as a new CI leader to put together a CI function or to provide some input in shaping or revising an intelligence function, we have something for you today. Over the next hour, we will explore a systematic four-step process that will identify customers and key business issues, as well as define mission and scope to ensure that the core services are effectively and efficiently delivered into your organization so that insights and intelligence can flourish. I have the extreme pleasure of introducing Clifford Kalb, Cliff to all of his friends, president of C. Kalb and Associates. As I said, I had the pleasure of meeting Cliff years ago when he was the head of strategic business analysis at Merck, leading their global intelligence function. His sustained track record of innovative success in marketing, strategic planning, business intelligence and analysis, market research, health policy in multiple companies all speak for themselves, and definitely a leader in this field. Active across the industry, he served as the past president of both SKIP and PBIRG, and the chairman of the Conference Board Council on Competitive Analysis. Cliff is a 2004 CI Fellow and also chaired the fellowship. He's one of the few fellows ever recognized with the 2013 SKIP Meritorious Award and in 2014 as recipient of the Fay Brill Distinguished Service Award. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Cliff Kalb. Thank you for joining us today, Cliff.
Well, thank you so much, Craig. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to be with everybody who's on board with us. We have a really interesting topic today and a lot to cover. So that terrific introduction, I'm just going to dive right into the material and we'll move as quickly as possible through it. Setting up a CI function is hard. It's hard work. But the purpose of today's webinar is to make it easier for you. If proper preparation is done, and it's done rigorously, the chance for long-term success are enhanced dramatically. My hope is that you'll learn something from this webinar and apply it to the framework, apply the framework that I'll explain to you to use in your setting if you're setting up a function or reviving a function. Before we actually jump into the material, I want to thank one person in particular. His name is Jan Herring. If you haven't heard that name, you've probably been living under a rock. He is the person that, to me, is probably the icon of teachers in the field of intelligence that so many of those who are fellows now have referred to as a mentor. He's a fellow, he's a founder of the fellows, and he's an icon and an educator, not for a few years, but for decades. I was very lucky to have the chance to work with him over 10 years at the Academy of as an instructor, and I was privileged to have the opportunity to have him as a mentor. So I want to just say thanks to Jan for helping with this material, which is something that he had a very strong hand in putting together originally. So let's move to the first slide. Okay, so this is a four-step process, Craig indicated. And if this is, let's make the assumption that we're setting up a function for uh, purposes, and let's make sure that we're understanding that this is all pre-work that you need to do before you actually produce intelligence output. And if all this pre-work is done, your chance of having a function that will last and a function that will be respected will be greatly enhanced. The framework has been described after at least over 100 consulting engagements, plus personal experience of both Jan and myself. They are offered for your consideration, and it should be noted at the outset, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. The one that you choose, the model that you choose for your function, will be determined by your company size, the scope of CI need, the maturity of the group, and probably most of all, the decision-making style of the users of intelligence and the culture in which they operate. So let's dive into the 4 steps. First, on the left, as you notice, is the mission. And this is absolutely critical step because the vision doesn't come from you, the producer of intelligence. It comes from your client. It comes from the main client, who usually, if you happen to be lucky, is somebody that will also be your champion, somebody who saw a need for the creation of the function and decided that he needed to bring somebody in that it started. It could be a person that was promoted from inside, or it could be somebody brought from outside, maybe even from a competitor. The mission itself probably has statements in it that answer some of these questions. What is your purpose? What is your raison d'etre? Why do you exist? Why is CI needed in this company? Who are the producers of CI and who are not the producers of CI? Who are the consumers or the users of CI or the customers? And the last point, which I think is quite important, is if you're coming into a company that already has a number of existing decision support areas in place, the question you'd like to ask is, what is unique about the output that's provided by a CI function that is unavailable from anybody else who's already in place? So that's what it'll take to write a mission. Those are the thoughts that should go through it. Let's go to the second bullet, identifying an organization's key slide. The second bullet on the third slide. Okay, Craig, can we go backwards? Okay, thank you. Identifying the organization's key intelligence topic. If you haven't heard the term key intelligence topics, that's also something that is traceable back to Jan Herring. We refer to them as KITs as an abbreviation. Your client will not refer to them as KITs. They don't understand that term. That is an intelligence term. The user will call it a business problem, a business issue, a business obstacle, something they need to overcome that has to do with competition. The role of the person coming in a new setting up of a new function is to get along with his clients from the beginning, and there will probably be what I would call a honeymoon period, where over the first few months, you will be able to go around to the people that will be potential clients for your work and ask them a lot of questions about what kits are. What are their needs for intelligence support? And of course, you would be asking them, what exists now to meet those needs? Is it formal? Is it informal? If it's those and it exists, who's providing it? And what is your evaluation of how good it is? And how can it be improved if it's not good? And what functions may overlap with your mission? You ask him who provides decision support, he'll probably let you know that there are several other functions that do that, and you'll find that some of them may overlap with what you think should be your role. It's important to find that out early. The business issues that he'll probably talk to you about are often linked to the objectives process that's set for senior managers in a corporation. If you happen to be lucky again and start your new job around January, usually what happens is the objectives for the following year are written at the end of the previous year, and the person that has to achieve them is given them on quarterly targets, particularly for publicly held companies who have to speak out to their shareholders every quarter on their performance. So they will probably tell you, gee, I have to solve this problem by the end of the first quarter, and I have a business issue coming up in this place in the second quarter, etc. And as he's telling you this information, you're capturing it, because as you go from one interview to the next, and maybe there's 5 or 6 people that are going to be your initial clients, what you do as the next step is say this survey that you've just done shows some overlap of intelligence needs, which 2 or 3 of them maybe have a similar need where one project can be handled for 3 groups. Or it may turn out that all of them are separate and every person has to be treated as an individual. The process you have to go through, which is not simple, is rank forecasting these projects in terms of the impact they will have on the business in the long term. And what do I mean by impact? Not necessarily easily measurable in financial terms, but often the decision is made which gives a temporary or somewhat lasting competitive advantage to your firm in the marketplace. And those are the ones that you'd like to take on. You want to take on the ones that are tough. Why is that? Because you want to get to the end of the first year having done at least one project which has been seen by the management as a big win, a big win-win for you, for them, for your company, and for the people that purchase your products and services. So now we can move to the design area, which is the third box on the slide. This gets into the detail of how the exercise of competitive intelligence work will occur. And it's, again, during your honeymoon period, no question is too stupid to ask. Just ask it once, get an answer, and don't keep asking it over again. Remember the answer. So I'll start off with communication. Ask about how, to who, does it happen in meetings, does it happen one-on-one? What is the means by which it happens? Is it phone? Is it email? Is it text? Is it one-pagers? Is it oral briefs? Is it assessments? All of the above. What is the nature and importance of confidentiality in our work? Are there means by which these things should be protected? Are there restrictions that have to be placed on any written work we have? And who gives us the guidance on what is confidential and what is not confidential? The issue of archiving. How will we capture this information so it can be reused? Where will it be captured? Who will maintain it? And who will store it and retrieve it? I'd like to use it in the future. Then there are going to be staff issues. Personnel, what are the prospects or the need for understanding any unique processes for hiring and firing in a company if you're going to be a manager? Do you have to have job descriptions? Will they be written by you or by you in collaboration with human resources? Then the whole area of budgeting. How does budgeting work? Does the money come for uh, from your own budget or from your client's budget, etc. The last one is company culture. Emphasize this enough. It won't take you long when you get to what is the behavioral norm in your new company. It may be that the company is a conservative company, a company that takes very low risk in the decisions they make. On the other hand, it could be a very liberal company, which takes a lot of risk, and sometimes they win, and sometimes they lose, and that's okay for them. And then the other issue is what is the nature of how many levels are there between you and the ultimate boss? You report directly to the ultimate boss, and how does your work get communicated along that chain of command? So those are some of the issues that will fall into the design parameter. I think the company culture one is probably the most important. And then you get to the end, which is selecting an appropriate model. Now, the work we have done has resulted in 8 different models put together based on our work in over 100 different companies. And they go from what I would call the most simple to the most complex. I'm not going to be covering them all today. We'll get to probably the first 3, but I want to spend most of the time today on the preparation before you actually choose the model that you're going to use. We'll probably cover the first 3 types, and all of the ones that we'll be talking about have been tested, and they're employed models in companies right now and have been for years. Now we can go to the next one. So what are the keys to a successful program? And here I want to provide a shout out to John Prescott, who is another a fellow who's probably won every award and written every book in the field of intelligence that can be written from the University of Pittsburgh. He's an excellent teacher and the head of the strategy group out there. One of the things I learned from John in talking with him, and I learned from, he was one of the charter fellows that started SCIP many years ago. Basically said, you need is to carve out a unique space for a CI function in an area which is nobody else's turf. And as he reviewed the strategy literature and reviewed the intelligence literature, what he came across was one particular word that didn't appear enough that he thought should be used. And when I heard it, I said, I miss it also. I'd like to see it used more. Well, I'm going to fully endorse John's idea and suggest to you that the word rivalry is what we are expert at. Nobody else is. So if an issue comes up regarding a rivalry, that's the place where you come to the CI department. That's what's unique about us. If the champion person buys into that idea, that will become a differentiating feature between you and other groups which he may have thought should have had the whole issue of something else that they do as part of your mission. Saying that this is a CEO, president, general manager initiative. In order for this to be successful, this really has to be a top-down initiative. It's got to come from somebody who has this number of stripes on the arm that give them the power to be able to say to you, I'm in charge of this, I can fund it, I'm supporting it, and I want you to see these people that will be your initial customers. By the way, I wouldn't be surprised if you interviewed for the job before getting selected, that you had been sent already people who will become your customers. It wouldn't be surprising that the person who was the singles champion already thought you were a candidate he might hire to introduce you to them before you ever got there, get their endorsement that you should be joining. The whole management team doesn't mean every manager in the company. It means the group of managers that fit within workspace, the area that you can control. The studied approach, which you see on the second part of this slide, is surveying the capabilities as I described, putting them together into a way of communicating, and then beginning the process of actually designing the system itself and determining the areas of overlap, prioritizing the projects, ranking them, and frankly, dropping some. There will be some that were gathered during your original survey that will just become less important. It'll be apparent that that's the case. So you want to work on the high priority projects right from the outset to make sure that you're successful in the first year. And then appropriate system design. It's got to fit your culture, as I described before. Then you'll choose the right model and you'll move gradually. This is not going to happen overnight. You may start with no people and then go with one person, two people, and then it will grow to a larger group as skills develop and techniques develop and demand develops. And finally, what I had said on the first page, just stress it one more time. You need a win in the first year, something which is actionable, something that can change the way your client operates and makes the business more successful or improves their competitive advantage position in the marketplace. Next one. Slide is two specific vision statements that came from the two people I worked in. They both came from people who had former government backgrounds. So you see references to the military. They could be coming from a competitor with a well-developed CI function. And then they come into your company, and the first question they ask is, where's the intelligence function? If there is none, they'll say, let's start one. Because I was very pleased with the kind of intelligence I got when I was at my last firm. They will be involved in the startup, particularly as the head of the functional area, and will likely have, as I said, interviewed you along with the people that will be your candidates before you got there. In neither of the two cases, with Bob Galvin at Motorola and with Henry Lebanowitz at Merck, did they have an intelligence function before Jan came in and started his, and when I came in and started mine. The two parts of these vision statements that of interest to me, most of interest to me, is the last sentence of each one. One on the top, the Bob Galvin one, those who use the product of intelligence will be better to decide and act, which I think is a very distinct and pithy way of getting at the message. My supervisor was a little bit more flowery in his use of the language. It starts with, as military commanders are dependent on a constant flow of relevant intelligence to plot strategies and tactics, so too do captains of industry need adequate intelligence to achieve their commercial goals. In both cases, and this is the sentence that is the knockout sentence, knowledge is not only an instrument of power, it is essential insurance against disaster. And when I saw that statement written by him as the vision for the creation of this function, I said, I came to the right place. I've got somebody here who's going to support me 100% because he wants this function. And I have to be honest with you and tell you, I was very lucky to have that happen. Couldn't have anticipated that when I got there. Next one. This is the actual mission statement that was written at Motorola when it was created. A little bit on the longer side. I won't read the whole thing, but I will take you through the sections of it give you a sense of what it does, what does it cover. In the paragraph at the top, it says timely and appropriate intelligence. Always a reference to the future. This describes what I would call what we will do in the sentence. It introduces what our role is going to be. And then if you look down at the 3 bullets below, these 3 bullets basically say how we will do it. So it's monitoring, it's gathering and analyzing information on strategic changes in the environment, and it's forecasting future. See the word future again. This distinction of we are interested in helping guide the future. My supervisor used to say, the way that you run the business is you look out over the hood of the car straight ahead. You don't look in the rearview mirror. Past is over. You can't change it. It may inform you of things that we did wrong, but in order to do them right, we've got to move ahead. What this does is provide boundaries, provides boundaries for your work, gives you a sense of the process. The most important thing it does in is gives you a role where you're involved in supporting decision making and becoming what my favorite friend Ben Galad would say, fetch and tote jobs. Run into a library and pull out some numbers and create a table and send it off as a data fetcher. If you wind up in that role at the beginning, it's going to be very hard to get out of it. So you have to distinguish yourself from that role by stating from the outset that you're an advisor and you're going to provide recommendations, which may be controversial at times because they may differ. What is the standard approach to solving these business problems? Next slide. Now, what you see on this chart is a series of mission statements that I pulled from companies consulting work for. And they actually fall into 2 categories, which I think become obvious. I'm not going to talk about all of them, and I'll just give you 2 examples, and you can see how the pattern develops with the others. On the first bullet on the top, provide timely, relevant, and insightful evidence-based analysis and recommendations that support key business decisions. Key word in this one is business. Why? Because business means customers are everywhere. They're everywhere in the company. You can get companies from commercial, you can get them from R&D, you can get them from manufacturing, you can get them from the sales force, and you're going to be expected to handle them all. You look at the second one, provide decision support to commercial leadership that helps build and sustain competitive advantage in the marketplace. This is quite different. The key word is commercial, and the key word at the end is marketplace. This says customers are marketing and sales and advertising and people that interface with our customers in the field and probably don't have customers in the research area or customers in the manufacturing area. Perhaps there's another group of intelligence people that have a unique expertise that serve them alone. So they're only actually working in a different part of the company. Important for you to know that. So if you go through the rest of them on this chart, and I'm not going to cover them all except for the last one, I think, frankly, you'll see you could take the word commercial out of the second one and replace that word with R&D, or you could replace that word with manufacturing, and it would apply to a certain part of the company and not the whole company. The last one, I think, is quite interesting because it's probably about as different from the one that I showed you on the previous slide that you could imagine, just giving you a sense of what a breadth of the type of mission statements can be. This one is very succinct, but it provides a very powerful message to provide the knowledge to decide and act. That's it. And that would be, again, one suggesting to all the clients in the company, come talk to me. There's no group mentioned. etc. One last comment about all of these. Notice when you look at these is that there's no mention of the actual role of the intelligent producer in here being responsible for producing profit and loss, being responsible for financial performance, developing a certain market share. The role of a person in CI is advisory, it's a staff role, and that's wonderful because what it does is it gives you the freedom to think outside the box. It gives you the freedom to suggest ideas that come from your research, which may be, as I said before, controversial and different from the way it has always been done here before. And it enables the offering of findings and conclusions that are independent of any particular lower level business line manager if it turns out there are a number of people between you and the person who has to act. Often when you're in that situation, your message gets diluted on the way to the top. They don't actually hear an idea that might be considered a little bit outside the box, but could become that one that's going to be the big winner for you at the end of the first year. Next slide. I told you I was going to say a little bit more about key intelligence topics before getting into models themselves. The terminology actually comes from government intelligence services. In government, the nature of intelligence projects done are labeled national intelligence topics, abbreviated NITS, N-I-T-S. Once again, our colleague Jan Herring came over from the military side to the business side and said, let's do something similar on the business side. Just change the word national to key. That's how KITs were born. And then the key intelligence topics got abbreviated as KITs. And what came in as a later idea was the concept of KIQ, K-I-Q, which stands for Key Intelligence Question. Those are a list of series of questions that will support the responses you develop to the main topic, which is the key intelligence topic. This organizes your work in a way where you're focusing on the client's need in a way that is understood as a way to develop an action plan to get to where you want to go with the results that they're seeking. So I think it's important to understand where this language comes from and also the various types. The first type is an early warning one. Usually this one, the project itself is longer term. Often it's a monitoring type of project, which involves some kind of reporting, perhaps on a quarterly basis, particularly if it's a publicly held firm, which has to provide reports every quarter to the finance community. And maybe there are bulletins when events occur that are related to the kits that you're assigned. Usually that may go on for at least a year and maybe the issue is not resolved. The second category is called strategic or operating decisions. It's usually referred to, again, in a shortened way as decision kits. These are ones where decisions you have to make are strong business decisions that will have an impact in the long term. And the long term is defined differently than the quarterly approach to things. It may be the next 3 to 5 years. If you happen to be in Switzerland or you happen to be in Japan, it might even be as long as 10 years or 15 years into the future. They take a different look at the future than we do in America. Examples: partnerships, mergers, acquisitions, licensing deals, hiring and layoffs, tracking hiring and layoffs, moving in a different direction is an indicator of strategic intent. I like to use the term follow the money, invest versus divest. If you're investing in something and you're hiring people and building factories and building plants, you're moving in a direction that's new for you. For instance, if you're an automobile company, you might be moving from traditional cars that run on gas to electronic vehicles. See the money moving to EVs and the money declining for the current cars that are going to be going out of style when they're replaced by the new technology. It also could be new geographies where you have to explore whether or not you should start a new business in a new country or a new part of the world and understand the culture there before you decide to jump in. Also, regulatory changes and government initiatives would fall under this that can impact you. And by the way, that includes changes in politics. We face an election in this country at the end of the year. CI people are thinking about which of the parties will wind up in power and what that will mean for their business and how operations may change as a result of the kind of relationship they'll have with governments and the kinds of regulatory actions that will be placed on them. The next one is knowing the competition. I like to add to that the term outmaneuver them. I like that term. That's a Liam Fahey term. I think is another expert in the field. This is where you figure out a way to preempt competition, do something before they do it, so that you wind up occupying a place that they plan before they get there. Or when you have a product which has a certain life cycle, and at the end of the life cycle, you wind up adding new forms of the product to extend its life cycle, which other companies may not copy. And then finally, the competitive situation is much broader than just your competitors. There's a strong distinction that you ought to have between the term competitor intelligence, the term competitive intelligence. In a competitive environment, you have stakeholders in a lot of places, not just competitors. And those things can affect your business just as much, if not more, as competitors. In the drug business, happen to be in a business where our main competitors are other producers of tablets, pills, things that you take in a bottle that you get from a pharmacy. Well, as soon as you get into countries like Germany and places in South America and other parts of the world, first thing you learn is that's not the way medicine is practiced in these countries. And in order for you to compete there, you're going to be competing against natural medicines, herbal medicines, medicines that are built into devices. Imagine having your surgery replaced by acupuncture. That's the kind of thing I'm thinking. So your scope of what is defined as competition may not be traditional competitors, and it's often CI's role to come back to someone who's looking to get into a new market around the world. What is the scope of competition, and how easy is it going to be to move people from what they've been doing for 2,000 years to something that we've been doing? And don't forget, America is only 200 years old plus. We're not like most of the rest of the babies. Go to the next one. I've never done any presentation on CI without talking about ethics. It's my favorite topic. I could do a whole couple of hours on it. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to keep it short. As a baseline, SCIP has developed a code of ethics. I was the president of SCIP at the time when we revised the SCIP standard ethics policy in the year 2000. I checked it this morning, and in 23 years, the words have not changed. They're the same. It's simple, it's straightforward, but it is intentionally vague. And the reason it's intentionally vague is to encourage everybody who gets into the field to develop their own for their own company. but it gives you an idea of the direction to go. This is something you do with attorneys. In my company, I was fortunate to have two CEOs, Chief Executive Officer and a Chief Ethics Officer. Chief Ethics Officer was an attorney, had written which was what was called our company code of conduct. It didn't only apply to CI, but applied to the way our employees were expected to behave in the outer world, the business world. I sat down with her. We developed a draft of a competitive intelligence collection ethics policy, and we convinced her to include it in the overall business code of conduct that's read by all people who join the company. If I had to make it short and sweet, the 4 points on the bottom are the most important. If material is available in the public domain, it's okay. In other words, if you can get it in the library, if you can get it from a newspaper, if you can get it from listening to a speech at a meeting, if you can go to a conference and talk to people who work for the company, all of that's okay. What's not okay is material that's protected or proprietary. And the examples of this that are probably most apparent are patented products, patented services, trademarks, formulas. Classic one that's talked about is the formula for Coca-Cola, which is not patented, but is certainly a company secret that they feel needs to be kept private. The next thing is avoiding misrepresentation. If you hire an agency to do collection for you, they become an extension of your own internal staff. So once you've established an collection activities, they will be bound to they are required to follow the policy that you have designed for them while they're in the field. Always, the guideline I like to provide to everyone, make sure you have a lawyer that is understanding of the role that competitive intelligence plays in the company, the value it adds, that it isn't spying, as some people still think, believe it or not, which was a problem for the early years, and that they can always be consulted whenever you come across a situation that you haven't come across before. And what you would like to do is stop the work, get the specifics of the case, sit down with the lawyer, get legal advice, act on that advice. If you're told to go ahead, fine. If you're told to stop, avoid the next step, I would follow that advice. Your client, if they've given you a project, gets in it, and only one of them becomes an area that would have been risky to pursue, and you come back with findings on 90%, and they ask, why didn't you get it on the last one? And you say, because the legal department advised us not to pursue it, they will understand. And the rest of making of the decision will still be able to proceed without it, and it'll keep you out of trouble. Let's go to the next one, which is the first model. This is the earliest model, the simplest model. I'm going to cover three. This one is called the business intelligence team. Some places it has other terms. Sometimes it's called an ad hoc team. Sometimes it's called a committee. Sometimes it's called a task force. The commonality of those names are that it's put together for a specific issue, for a specific time, which has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It uses people inside the company who have some of the skills that you see on the bottom of the page, which are a set of skills that you normally see in a well-rounded intelligence professional who's been doing this work for some time. You won't find people in the group that have skills. The goal is to put the group together so that when you have enough people, each of those skills is at least represented in one or two people. Collaboration from the people inside the group is the goal, to get to the end for the user and get them an answer. So as I go through each model, I'm going to try to evaluate them from a pro and a con perspective. And by the way, the two arrows that you see on the top that come out of the center and are going to the upper left and the upper right, this indicates that it doesn't always have to be only internal people. If you need an outside consultant, you may want to bring them in, or an outside subject matter expert, you may want to bring that into this group, but only temporarily for that issue. So what are the pros? Usually good analytical results, time-effective use of resources, prompt and pragmatic recommendations, and sort of a side effect, which is a term that we use in the drug industry and a lot, but here side effect may be a beneficial effect. If you're observing this group work, you may actually uncover a candidate who might become a full-time CI person because you see how they behave and where many people are necessary, and it intrigues them so much that they might want to apply for a job in your area. So you may actually find intelligence as a result of using this model. What are the cons of this model? It lacks the ability to dig deeply into action options. Because of it being time bound, probably you're going to come up with one or maybe two options for your decision maker to consider. It also does not create an institutional memory. Once the job is done, the group has come together, they've done the exercise, and they disband. There is no central repository for capturing the method and the outcomes for future reference, which could save you a tremendous amount of time if similar issues come up in the future, perhaps in a different field or in a different part of the world, where you could refer back to a project you did and say, gee, we don't have to start by reinventing the wheel. We can follow the pattern and the use function and the analytical methods that we used on one we did last year. And finally, this really can't be used for early warning type things because of the fact that it's short term and it turns around something. And let's say I'm going to guess 6 to 8 weeks, normal, and then it disbands. And probably the next time you would call it together, the people that are in the group are completely different. The same group would never come together again because the task will determine what kind of expertise is needed. So that's the first model. What's obviously missing from this model is there is no full-time CI person company. The second model is called the business process manager, the business intelligence or competitive intelligence process manager. It's also called the sole practitioner model or the single person operation. See here, if you've seen the illustrated before, is the intelligence cycle with the steps in it and the role that the person who is the official person who has a training in intelligence work will have. You'll also note that there are two different colors on the slide. So what this illustrates is that the role for the director, and you usually hire somebody in at the director level for planning and direction. He will also be the person who, quote unquote, takes the order, make sure it's clearly understood what's needed, what the kits are, what the deadlines are, what decisions have to be made. And then he says, okay, I've got to develop an action plan and I need to get to the end, but I don't have any people that work for me. So I'm going to look for them either other parts of the company or on the outside. You follow the same pattern, starting with secondary work in a library or information services. which may be inside or out, then move to collection of humans from human sources, which is primary interviewing or visiting people in person, conferences or conventions. And then finally, the person in the analysis role may also be an outside person, and that person is responsible for putting the pieces of the puzzle together, come from secondary research and come from primary research with the recommendations. The recommendations are developed, the story is developed, it goes back to the director. That's why the color at the end is the same as it is at the beginning, because it's the director's role to deliver the findings to the user. That's the cycle for the BI process manager. This one has some pretty unusual cons. It's good because it's expensive. Usually it can be done for short-term projects, as I suggested, not particularly good for the longer-term ones. But probably you will have a limited number of projects that can be done. Because you're doing this the way it's being done, the ones that I've seen generally have to be done one at a time. So you can't have multiple projects going on at the same time. You do one at the end, and when you get to the end, you start the second one. It's weak on early warning. No institutional knowledge is captured. What the big surprise is that it often fails for a reason which you wouldn't have predicted at the beginning. It fails because the person who came in leaves the job because you didn't know when he was hired that one of the hidden objectives of the people that hired him was that this was not only a look at the project, but a look at the person and his ability to manage people that don't work for him. And if it looks as if he managed the project well, they got the kind of results that they wanted, it came back on meeting the deadline and helped them make a good, take a strong action in the marketplace, may offer him a full-time job doing something else, perhaps, where he has profit and loss responsibility. And if the work is not done well, it's probably fair to say to him, you're not going to be continuing in this job, and he will leave. He'll go somewhere else. So one of the reasons it fails is because of churn. People in this job don't intend to stay in it long term. And usually around the company, you will hear, let's say in the coffee room, when they're talking about people and the nature of projects, this particular job is considered a developmental position, which basically means you're going to be in a while, but you're going to move on. And don't think that this is going to become your mentor forever, because he won't be there very long. That's one of the side effects of choosing this model. Let's go to the final model I'm going to discuss today, which is the third one. This one is called the Basic Intelligence System. It's more affectionately referred to as two minds and a library. Well, what you see in this model, if you look at the bottom, on the lower right, you see a box that has the collector. And on the left, you see a box that has the analyst. This also came from government. In government intelligence work, it's not uncommon for collectors to do collection because you're hiring a person who has a certain set of skills that have to do with the ability to engage people in conversation. They are very good listeners. They're very good with empathy. They make sure that the person feels comfortable and can share what you're actually trying to get after without feeling that they're being put into a box. I have found over the years, and I think that women have traditionally been better at this job. I have also found that mostly women are doing this job very well. On the other hand, the analyst type is on the left might even be more of an introvert, a person who's a thinker, a person who is essential, but has basically the role of taking what came from the library, what came from the primary research, putting the puzzle together, generating the output, and then providing their feedback to the user to complete the project. Now, this is kind of to confuse you a bit, but if you have a good imagination, you can see on this chart that although it looks like a series of four boxes, it is actually the same circle you saw on the previous page. It starts with the user, it goes to the library, it goes to the collector, it goes to the analyst, it comes back to the user, and the cycle continues. Where this one has a weakness, and I've seen it happen from time to time, is the user doesn't know who to call. Does he call the library, them the mission, or give them the assignment? Does he call the collector? Does he call the analyst? Does he have to have a meeting with all of them? He doesn't want to do that. He just wants it simple. So what usually will happen with this is sort of the first one, is the next hire is a director, someone who comes in over the top of these two people, who serves as the person who develops a uh, project manager scheme and a way to sort out work that comes in. This can generate some excellent intelligence output. And as a result, I would predict that if you have this model, you will develop demand faster than if you had any of the previous models I've talked about. And it won't be long until demand will exceed supply. And that's when you have a risk of failure. Because if you can't meet the deadlines because you have too many projects going on at the same time, you're going to need extra resources. And the way that will work is when the director gets hired, he will provide those extra resources for you by adding people or adding outside or getting additional budget work done. It's a simple model, but it's probably one that you'll see in a lot of places. And frankly, it is the one that I found when I first came to America. There were two people in the department, an analyst and a collector. And I came in as the director, and every place I went to, they told me the same thing. I don't know who to call. My answer was, call me. And that's how it worked out from that point. So I'm going to stop here, turn it back over to Craig. I guess we're going to move into some questions now. And I'm happy to have had you pay attention to me for such a long time. I don't know how much time we have left, but let's do what comes next. Craig?
Great. Thank you, Cliff. Yes. One burning question, and you talked about this on one of your early slides. Must the CIBI group report to the CEO?
No, the CEI group may not report to the CEO. And you'll see when we have part two of this talk, which will happen in the future, you'll find that in larger corporations, often they don't. In smaller corporations, they may because they may have fewer employees. But I would say probably somebody who is in a management role will be the supervisor, will be the boss, and it may most likely will be someone who has profit and loss responsibility in their job.
Great. Yeah, no, I feel that very well. In fact, at Wyeth, we had a manager, a product manager, who was responsible for a $3 million brand. And obviously, he's someone that carried quite a bit of gravitas within the organization. And so, what he wanted and the information that he needed got delivered to him.
Right.
Slightly different, but along the same lines. Um, how would you characterize the relationship between the sales force, provided there is one, but the sales function and the rest of the organization in terms of whether the CI serves both one versus the other, and how does that typically work best?
Well, in an operating group, let me make the distinction first between what I would call a global company, which has a headquarters, and then it has operating units in the field. If we're talking about the operating unit in the field, which I think is what you're talking about, let's say company's headquarters is in Japan, but they have an operating unit in the United States. The marketing and salespeople are based in the United States, and that's what you're talking about, correct?
Yes.
I think the questioner is asking. Yeah, I think that um, there are systems set up where people communicate intelligence in to a place where it's captured and reviewed by people in an intelligence function. Haven't been able over the years to find many of them that work very well unless direction is provided by the intelligence department to the people in the field what they're looking for and how important one type of intelligence is versus another. Um, Particularly if it's something which is only local. If a pattern develops, you get 15 calls from 15 different salespeople all over the country that competitor X is introducing a new product, and it's the same product in every country, then that's probably something that's valuable to share with everyone. On the other hand, if you only hear it once, then maybe it's just unique to that place. I would say you have to have sort of the guidelines provided to the people in the field, only provide what you think you've heard is occurring in multiple places and is a trend that is likely to generate a whole new competitive threat that you can anticipate and react to.
Great. I'm assuming that the fact that your email is included on this slide, that people, if they have burning questions, can reach out to you and get additional help in terms of questions or other key information that you can provide.
Absolutely. I'll be happy to do that. If you want to send me an email with a particular question, I will answer it to you alone or to any group of you that wants to get together and come up with a list of questions. Fine.
Great. The feed was very active, and one of the issues, and I'll end with this, Cliff, and that is AI is now a part of the information gathering and analytic process. And one of the questions was, is there a need to avoid AI at all costs, or is it really sufficient to simply source the information that AI is providing, provided you can confirm and do so? Is AI playing a different role in terms of how these models and the function get set up, or things you need to watch out for?
Well, I don't think it's been around long enough to be able to say firmly that there's an answer to that. I'd say that at this stage, not proven, it's not tested long enough to be able to say the information they're providing is accurate, and that is incredibly important. Second, I would imagine that the pace at which different forms of AI develop will be quite quick, quite fast, and you'll have version one, version two, version three, version four, which will have all different and better services. As those services are added, you have to make judgments as to whether the AI will be restricted in terms of its role in supporting you in a CI role. The term that I've heard often is the co-pilot kind of role, but not really involved in that last stage of the cycle that I had mentioned before, which was the decision-making recommendations, mostly in the gathering and in the assembly and organization of information that's used to support those recommendations. So right now, I think it's fine to say speed up the process a bit in terms of gathering, and it will continue to learn every time you ask. So I think the pace of change will be fast, and it has to be observed carefully because if you ask me that question a year from now,
Yeah, it's changing all the time. And in fact, next month on March 21st, the CI Fellows will be having, it's actually a reprise of a session that we did last year, looking at the AI in CI and whether or not we would all need to find new jobs. And the result from last year was that no one's going away quick, but as you said, Cliff, it does change some factors, the timing, how people authenticate and verify information. So we're looking forward to that on the 21st of March next month. In April, you'll be back, and we'll look at the rest of the models and some of the additional complexity as it relates to setting up a functioning CI, BI group and the insights derived from that. So I would like to take this moment to thank you, Cliff. That was very engaging, very interesting. And we look forward to everyone joining us next month for a look at AI and CI, then, now, and next. And then join us again in April as we revisit the topic of setting up a CI function with more sophisticated and more complex models in the space. So with that, Derek, I'll turn it over to you to finish us off.
That sounds good. Craig, Cliff, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, everybody, for prioritizing this webinar on your schedules, and we'll look forward to seeing you all again on March 21st.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you.